The biggest lie the government tells is CPI, but everybody is saying that inflation is all but done with. And I'm going to dive in to what everybody is missing and show you guys why you shouldn't trust the governmental data when it comes to things like CPI and reporting inflation. But first, let's dive in and see what everybody around the globe is saying. So CBS is here reporting that inflation rate rose by 2.3% CPI. Here's what the data means. The CPI forecast was expected to rise to 2.4% last month, according to economists polled by financial data. The CPI basket of goods, yada, yada, yada. On a month-over-month basis, the CPI rose by 0.2, lighter than the 0.03 forecasted by economists. So housing costs were a major driver of inflation. And last month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said that energy costs also ticked higher. Now, we're going to dive into these costs one by one here, but let's go into the 1 month change in percent. And this is straight from the US government, right? So they're saying the 1 month change in percent for urban consumers has risen by 0.2% within this past month. And the 12-month change, they're saying all items, less food and energy. That is absolutely insane that they're even reporting this data to you guys, saying, hey, here's what inflation is. If you don't need to drive anywhere, well, a lot of you have to drive to work now. And if you don't eat anything, I mean, yeah, and you can live without any AC. You could do all of these different things here in the US. I mean, that's essentially what they're telling you right now. So I think that the fact that they're even reporting this is absolutely asinine. So let's dive into just a simple tweet here that core CPI was 0.2% and month over month expected is 0.3%. CPI core is at 0.2% and month over month, whereas expected was 0.3. Expected was 2.4. It hit 2.3. Core was 2.8 and year over year, and expected was 2.8. So all of this to say that they're essentially trying to say that inflation is done with, and like the tariff narrative is way, way overblown, which I mean, I personally think it's overblown as well. So I don't hate that argument, but I do think that inflation is not done with. And there's a reason why we see the percent chance of a cut still at an extremely low rate. We've got the CME group projecting a chance of a cut being just 8.2%. Now, I don't know about you guys, but 8.2 out of 100 is a very low percentage. And I don't think, call me a betting man, but I wouldn't think that that's what we would essentially see here, right? Is that we'd see the potential of, CPI now starting to tick down. We would see potentially a rate cut. That's what everybody was thinking, right? But we're not seeing that. Now, why, right? It's because the biggest lie the government tells us is CPI, or at least that's one of my favorite things to say. Because if you look at the egg prices, right, it's the second biggest drop on record. So eggflation is absolutely done with. It's, I know you guys all got your chickens and everything along those lines, so you don't necessarily need to go buy those eggs. And maybe that's why we're seeing these egg prices fall so dramatically, is because everybody at home got their chickens and you don't need to buy eggs, right? Obviously, that's kidding here, but we're seeing egg prices absolutely cut. And this has been a huge topic over time. But let's dive in to this great table here. Table A. I always think it tells a lot, right? Because what do we see? Some big negative numbers. We see energy, gasoline down over 11%. We see just energy in general down. But the big number that we've got here is utility services up 15%. Now, I get it. Utility is a small portion, but still up 15% is absolutely astronomical. And then all items less food than and energy, you get 2.8 inflation. But okay, they're saying because energy drops so much, this is how it's weighting it, and it's bringing it back down to that 2.3%. But as we know, they change the basket of goods all the time. Many of you guys who have come to this channel before know I absolutely love this website over here called Govflation. You can go to govflation.org to see this, or .com, excuse me, to see this. But they love to show the money printer. So they haven't updated this. Oh, no, I think they did here, 2.3%. They haven't updated based on what we're seeing here from the CPI. But if you look back on these data, right, 3% here for January, that was 10.67% actual CPI, right? I mean, we see these numbers come in and the real return and everything else, of these different quarters, the GDPs, all these things. What we see is that the CPI comes in, the Govflation headlines, the drastic gap is dramatically increased, right? So let's see, 2.7%. It was at 10.54% was the real CPI. Now, you guys might be asking, what is the real CPI? Well, the real CPI was how much the CPI was reported at based on the basket of goods back in 1982. Now, this is post getting off that gold standard. And it was prior to the first different change of the basket of goods that the government started reporting on. So it's essentially what the government used to say was inflation, and now is essentially disagreeing with that number because they changed the basket of goods on a yearly basis. It seems like maybe even more rapidly than that. But let's check in with our friends over at CNBC. What are they saying about this? Because it's less than expected and the lowest since 2021. So it's interesting because it's all been negative about the tariffs. And these guys are very, very just, I guess, like anti-Trump is the way to put it here. So because they're anti-Trump, they look at all these different numbers and they try to find something to blame it on, right? So the consumer price index rose a seasonally adjusted 0.2% for the month, putting a 12-month inflation rate at 2.3%. It's lowest. The core CPI increased 0.2%, while year over year was 2.8. Egg prices, that's the headline, right? I already showed you guys the eggflation, but the egg prices are, for some reason, always getting these headlines, even though the government tells you don't eat eggs. They tell you, they scream from the top of the lungs, eggs aren't good for you. But now all of a sudden, they're actively tracking egg inflation. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Anyway, that's beside the point. While the April CPI figures were relatively tame, the Trump tariffs remain a wild card, right? The Trump tariffs are a wild card, even though at this time, when April CPI was being measured during the month of April, we were still in a trade war with China. And now what are we seeing? We're seeing inflation tumble on down and continue to go farther and farther down. Now, as I stated, it's interesting because Trump is saying, hey, we've got inflation under wraps. We need to cut interest rates. But Jay Powell is saying, not so fast, my friend. Not so fast. What are we seeing here? We're seeing, this 8.2% of overall chance to cut interest rates. So I think that we're going to start to see this go down. And I think that there is a slim chance that we actually end up cutting interest rates. And I think it's because Jay Powell is smart and realizes this. What they're reporting for CPI is not what the actual, inflation rate is. The consumer price index, excluding volatile food and energy prices. That's actually insane, that statement there. Excluding volatile food and energy prices. Why should these things be volatile? They shouldn't be. But the monthly readings were a bit higher than in March, though price increases remained well off their highs from 3 years ago during the last administration. So good news on inflation. We're seeing the consumer price index start to fall. And month over month, it is falling for whatever, take it for whatever it is. I always take it with a grain of salt because as I started this live stream with, the biggest lie I feel is CPI. They're not necessarily telling you all of what is going on there. They're not really letting you get a full peek underneath the hood. So, the GOAT all nighter hider in the chat, smoke that like Cheech and Chong. Appreciate you always tuning in for the second time with me today. But what are we seeing here out of the Dixie? We're seeing some interesting moves. We saw the Dixie get up over that 101 mark yesterday, falling down just under it right now. So the strength still, remaining pretty strong above that 100 mark. We didn't have that for a long period of time. So I'm glad we are seeing that right now. And I hope to continue to see that still rise up and continue to, pump along. And how did the market react to all of this news? I mean, of course, we saw the market chomping at the bit yesterday, but we had another good day, another green day here today. Not like the band, but we had, a little afternoon delight, had the sky rockets in flight. Boo! Afternoon delight with the S&P 500 seeing a nice little bump ski here, a nice little raise, increasing here over time. So I think that that'll continue to, push in that good direction. But I think that the one thing that everybody's missing is that, these are all just reported numbers, right? They're governmental data. It's stuff that's manipulated, and it's been manipulated since the beginning of time. The governments use this data to control the narrative. The narrative right now is, hey, inflation's under wraps. Look, the basket of goods was changed under the last administration. And I think that that's going to continue to just essentially pump the bags of those in there. But, I think the long-winded way to say that at the end of the day, the utility prices were up 15+%. And I think not a lot of people are talking about that year over year. We're seeing utilities rise up because we're seeing a lot of things like eggs tumble, like gasoline tumble. There's a lot of issues still underlying the hood. And I think, the potential of the trade agreement that we saw here, we're going to start to see some wonky things and a lot of volatility in the market. Granted, we've already seen a lot of volatility just in food prices, including eggs alone. So I think that that's something that we need to look forward to and buckle up, Buttercup, because we're going to see a lot more volatility when it comes to all of these different metrics. But I appreciate you guys tuning in with me here on another one of these great live streams. All Nighter Hider, the GOAT. Thank you so much for coming in the chat. I'm going to cut this one a little bit short here, as I did a little bit longer of one on the Green Candle channel. And make sure you hit that subscribe button with the bell notification so you guys know when I'm going live. And I'll catch you guys all tomorrow.